After I was exiled to the border, my fiancé got together with the imperial sister I had bullied for years. Everyone in the capital said she was my substitute later at a banquet. She clumsily broke my late mother's keepsake, kneeling before me, tears streaming down like rain. "Sister, I didn't mean to. Please don't be mad at me." Li Wuxia pulled her up, held her in his arms, and looked at me coldly. "If you have complaints, take it out on me. Don't bully your sister." Before he finished speaking, I drew my sword and aimed it at his throat. "What is the rush? Isn't it your turn now? If you love her so much, then die with her." On the second day back in the capital, I entered the palace to have an audience with Father Emperor. At the palace gate, I dismounted from my horse. At a glance, I spotted two all too familiar figures just a few steps away. Li Wuxia, the childhood sweetheart I grew up with and was once engaged to, and my half-sister, Imperial Princess Zhang Jingyue. "You just recovered from a cold. Why are you dressed so lightly again today?" Li Wuxia frowned, took off his cloak, and wrapped her up tightly. "Wait until you are back in the palace. Take it off when it is warm." Snow fell on her eyelashes, then melted into water as she blinked, trickling down her delicate face, making her look especially pitiful. "I heard Imperial Sister returned to the capital a few days ago." Zhang Jingyue sniffled, her eyes a bit red. "Everyone in the palace says that now she has military achievements, even if she wanted to kill me. Father Emperor would only comply. With me protecting you, who would dare?" I stood to the side, finally unable to hold back. "You two are truly deeply in love." Li Wuxia suddenly turned his head. Seeing it was me, he instinctively stepped forward, shielding Zhang Jingyue behind him, then called out in a low voice, "Shu Yi." I adjusted the sword at my waist. Before I could speak, Zhang Jingyue spoke first. 3 years apart. Elder sister remains unaffected by the bitter cold of the frontier, growing ever more stunning. As she spoke, she carefully put on an ingratiating smile for me. That look truly innocent and pitiful. I watched her with great interest, then after a moment suddenly let out a cold sneer. "I can't compare to you, Zhang Jingyue. Now you are even more repulsive than 3 years ago. This princess fears she might vomit if she looks at you one more time." "Zhang Shuyi," Li Wuxia shouted angrily, "you've just returned to the capital and you are already going after Ayue at every turn? What? Is that not allowed?" He looked at me with disappointment written all over his face. "Back then, you were already arrogant and domineering, targeting your sister in everything. I thought 3 years of exile might have tempered that. I never expected you would become this vicious." A sharp pain churned and spread from my heart. I stood in the increasingly bitter wind and snow. Somehow, I suddenly thought of the past 3 years ago, when Father Emperor exiled me to the frontier. Li Wuxia pleaded everywhere high and low, yet could never find a way to save me instead. Because the commotion was too big, he got 20 lashes from his father. The day I left the capital, he came to see me off. Because of the whip wounds, his face was pale from blood loss, yet his eyes were rimmed with a hint of red. "Shu Yi, I'll wait for you to come back. No matter how long, I'll always wait for you." Snapping back to reality, I let out a cold laugh. That is right, I am domineering. Not only domineering, I've even killed people. If you are scared, tell that little white lotus in your arms to keep her tail between her legs and stop provoking me. Leaving Li Wuxia and Zhang Jingyue with her gloomy expression where they stood, I turned and left, heading to the imperial study to have an audience with Father Emperor. By the time our conversation ended, it was nearly dusk. I was about to take my leave when he suddenly remembered something. "Since you've returned to the capital this time, have you not yet seen Yanjin?" I was stunned for a moment, then nodded. "Number. Go see him, Zhang Yanjin. My brother from the same mother, after Mother Empress passed away from illness. The two of us relied on each other in the palace. 3 years ago, I took the blame for him, which is why Father Emperor banished me to the bitter cold of the northern frontier. At that time, it was pouring rain, and I was forced to kneel before the hall. Brother held an umbrella over me, his eyes red. I sighed. I am now a criminal. It is better if imperial brother keeps his distance from me. Shu-yi, I wasn't thorough enough in handling things, and I failed to protect you. He said, I am not a competent brother. 3 years have passed, and he has become the crown prince yet now. I had been standing outside the Eastern Palace for over an hour. The palace servants at the entrance kept saying he was occupied with official duties and had no time to see me. I was silent for a moment, then said softly, "Since brother is busy, I'll come to pay my respects another day." Turning to walk to the entrance, I ran right into Zhang Jingyue. With Li Wuzhe absent, she no longer bothered putting on her innocent flower act in front of me. Raising her eyebrows, she asked me with a smile, "What is wrong? Imperial sister, crown prince brother won't see you." I looked at her expressionlessly for a while, then suddenly reached out to grab her collar and kicked the back of her knee. She knelt painfully in the snow, and I pressed her head down into the snowdrift. Knowing full well I have military merits and imperial rewards to my name, yet you don't bow when you see me. Is this the etiquette imperial sister has learned? Watching her lying in the snow with a wretched face, I finally straightened up with satisfaction and left. When I reached the narrow passage, I couldn't help but look back Zhang Yanzhen, who had just been occupied with official duties. Upon hearing Zhang Jingyue had come to see him, eagerly ordered the palace gates opened. "I had someone stew your favorite sweet soup. How did you end up like this?" From afar, Zhang Jingyue's voice, feigning strength, reached my ears. "It is nothing. I just accidentally fell." She paused for a moment, her voice suddenly carrying an uncontrollable sob. Imperial sister probably just returned to the palace and saw me and felt unhappy. 7 days later, there was a banquet in the palace. In the days since I returned to the capital, rumors have been spreading everywhere. They all say I was young and unruly in the past, bullying Zhang Jingyue many times. After spending a few years at the border, my temperament became even more fierce and brutal. The moment I came back, I started targeting her at every turn. Isn't it normal to target her? After all, the one who was betrothed to the young Marquis of Zhongyang since childhood was clearly the third princess. I heard that at first, the young Marquis only treated the 6th princess as a substitute for the 3rd princess, and only developed feelings for her over time. You don't even know yet. That day, the 3rd princess stood outside the Eastern Palace for half a day, and His Highness the Crown Prince refused to see her, someone even her own brother despises. I stepped into the hall, and the whispering around me immediately quieted down. As soon as I sat down, I spotted Zhang Yue not far away. She was dressed in fine clothes, holding a wine cup, and came to toast me with a timid expression. "In the past, I have offended you greatly, imperial sister." As she raised her hand, her sleeve slid down, revealing on her slender wrist that all too familiar white jade bracelet. I grabbed her wrist and said harshly, "Who allowed you to wear my late mother's keepsake and flaunt it in front of me?" Frightened, her tears fell in streams. "I am sorry. Crown Prince brother put this on me. I'll take it off right now." She reached out in a panic to remove it, and when she exerted force, she stumbled and fell to the ground. The bracelet also fell to the ground, shattering into pieces. I shot to my feet. "You want to die." She lay prostrate on the ground, trembling, tears rolling down like a broken string. "I am sorry, royal sister. I didn't mean to. It is just that day when you made me bow in the snow, I hurt my knees." Before she could finish, Li Wuzhe suddenly appeared. He pulled her up from the ground, held her in his arms, and looked at me coldly. "After you left, I did fall for Yue, but that is not her fault. If you have complaints, take them up with me. Don't bully your sister." My hand pressed on the sword hilt, drew the long sword from my waist, and pointed it straight at his throat. "What is the rush? Isn't it your turn now? After all these years, you still only know these despicable and vulgar tricks. Do you think I'll let you off the hook after you shattered my mother's mementos right in front of me?" I looked at Zhang Jingyue with disgust, then turned my gaze to Li Wuzhe. Love her so much, then die with her. The entire hall fell silent. The long sword in my hand inched forward. It had barely pierced half an inch into his flesh when a cup suddenly flew over from the side and hit my hand. The pain made my grip loosen slightly. Li Wuxia seized the moment to retreat with Zhang Jingyue in his arms. I turned my head and saw Zhang Yanjun in black robes, his expression sharp. My blood brother. The crown prince, he stood on the steps looking down at me from above. Zhang Shuyi, who permitted you to draw your sword in the palace, how improper. The cup that flew over hit exactly where the old wound on my wrist was, the pain turning my vision white. Yet I had no choice but to steady myself by propping the sword tip against the ground. I looked up at him and said word by word, "She smashed Mother Empress's keepsake." That bracelet was a gift from this prince to a Yue. How she deals with it is up to her. Zhang Yanjun finished speaking indifferently. Then his tone suddenly turned cold. This prince already knows everything about what happened outside the Eastern Palace that day. You've always been unruly. Years ago, you already couldn't stand Yue, embarrassing her at every turn. Now, you want to use Mother Empress's name to make things difficult for her again. He slightly turned his face, glancing at the biting cold wind outside the hall and the thick snow on the ground. His eyelashes lowered as he looked down at me with arrogance. Then go outside the great hall and kneel for 2 hours to reflect. In the great hall, countless eyes turned toward me all at once. I told you so. Even His Highness, the crown prince, has abandoned her. So what if she is a princess? Even if she was born of the late empress, bullying the 6th princess like this time and again is really too much. They say she has military achievements, but what can a woman possibly do? Maybe she claimed someone else's credit just to return to the capital. People in the capital are always good at going whichever way the wind blows. Now, seeing that Zhang Yanjun wasn't favoring me, they dared to gossip and speculate right in front of me. As for Zhang Yanjun, my dear brother, he didn't spare me another glance, walking toward Zhang Jingyue, who was being shielded behind Li Wuxia. "Are you hurt?" When facing Zhang Jingyue, his tone suddenly softened. He even took her hand and examined it carefully. Only when he saw that her fair, delicate wrist was unblemished did he feel relieved. Zhang Jingyue timidly withdrew her hand. "I am fine, brother. 3rd imperial sister surely didn't mean it. It is just I accidentally broke that bracelet. It is nothing, just a bracelet. It was meant to be given to someone suitable anyway." Seeing her blame herself, Zhang Yanjun felt even more heartache and softened his voice to comfort her. "In a few days, I'll pick an even better one for you." Zhang Jingyue's tears turned to smiles. Then can brother not punish imperial sister anymore? She was just anxious in the moment. I stood to the side and couldn't help but laugh out loud upon hearing this. Good, good, good. What a wonderful show. Why don't I set up a stage right here and brother can take your newly recognized good little sister up there to perform for everyone? Preposterous. Zhang Yanjun whipped his head around and scolded harshly. "Zhang Shuyi, I ordered you to kneel outside the hall and reflect on your actions. Why aren't you kneeling? Even if you recaptured 3 cities, it was merely atoning for your crimes through merit. Do you really think that just because you've killed a few people, you can disregard me and even Father Emperor? Do you know what crime it is to show contempt for imperial authority?" A huge accusation came crashing down Zhang Jingyue, who was being shielded behind them. Couldn't help but flash me a smug smile. I straightened my back and gripped my sword tightly. I slowly brought the blood-stained sword tip closer to my eyes, inch by inch, and examined it for a moment. Then I shook my head with some regret. So Big Brother still remembers that I was exiled to the border under false charges back then. Then doesn't Big Brother remember how I got those charges? As Jiang Yanjin's face suddenly changed, I continued. "If I hadn't taken the fall for your crimes, would you still be sitting comfortably as crown prince in the capital? The border is harsh with biting wind and heavy snow. Zhang Yanjun, a pampered piece of trash like you would have died hundreds of times over if you'd gone there. Sitting secure in the Eastern Palace hasn't grown you any brains at all. Instead, you've become like an old eunuch, nagging endlessly. I curled my lips and let out a cold laugh. You want me to kneel? Sure, but first ask if the sword in my hand agrees. As I confronted Zhang Yanjun in the Great Hall without backing down. Father Emperor finally arrived late. He exchanged a glance with Zhang Yanjun, then said in a peacekeeping tone, "Enough, it is just a small matter. Why do you siblings have to make such a scene? Shu Yi, put away your sword. No matter what, Yanjin is still your brother." Brother. When those two words landed, the pain I had deliberately ignored for so long surged up in my heart. For the rest of the palace banquet, I said nothing and just kept my head down drinking. After it ended, I got into the Princess Manor's carriage with my sword at my side. Before I could speak, a slightly rough hand rested on the back of my hand. I've heard about everything that happened in the palace just now. I raised my head and met a pair of clear eyes that seemed to see through everything. Feng Jingyu pressed my hand and spoke unhurriedly. "Your Highness shouldn't have acted impulsively. I fought at the border for 3 years and reclaimed several cities. She was my strategist. My most reliable companion covered by her warm and dry palm. The restless emotions in my heart gradually calmed down, slowly exhaling. I chuckled softly. It won't happen again. The matter I asked you to investigate. Any leads yet? It has been thoroughly investigated," she said solemnly. Back then, His Majesty knew full well that your Highness's exile was taking the blame for someone else, so he also neglected the second prince. Later, the second prince latched onto Consort Zhou through a certain case, and only then was he gradually favored by His Majesty and made crown prince. I sneered, so his position as crown prince was gained by currying favor with an enemy. The carriage traveled through the thick snow, rather unsteadily, in the dim candlelight. Whenever I closed my eyes, I seemed to see Mother's final appearance before her death. She drank the tonic laced with slow, acting poison that Consort Zhou had Zhang Jingyue deliver and withered away day by day until the end she leaned against the couch, her life force completely spent. With hands like withered trees, she stroked my face and my brothers one touch at a time. Your imperial father is foolish and immoral. From now on, only you two siblings will be left in the palace to depend on each other. Yanjin, remember what I am telling you. No matter what, protect your sister. 12-year-old Zhang Yanjin gripped her hand back, nearly biting his lips until they bled, but he didn't succeed. I opened my eyes, looked at Feng Jingyu across from me, and slowly smiled. The position of crown prince should naturally go to the capable. Since Zhang Yanjin is crippled, let someone else be the crown prince. I knew that by bringing up old matters and publicly slapping Zhang Yanjin's face, he wouldn't let it go. Sure enough, after the palace banquet, the rumors in the capital grew fiercer. Everyone said that I was able to return to the capital by taking credit for my subordinates' achievements. I heard that her so-called consecutive recovery of 4 cities was all won by the soldiers below, risking their lives. Well, of course, a princess pampered since childhood, what would she know about warfare? To steal the credit, she killed several of her deputy generals who knew the truth. The rumors grew more and more intense. Imperial father soon couldn't hold back and summoned me to the palace again. Shu Yi, I know you suffered a lot at the border, but now there is no smoke without fire, and the court officials' discussions aren't entirely groundless. As for what happened back then, considering you were young and ignorant, I let it go. I will bestow upon you a new title. You shall hand over the military tally and henceforth live peacefully as a princess. I didn't answer immediately, only raised my head to look at Zhang Yanjin standing beside him with that arrogant gaze. That day at the palace banquet, I had publicly humiliated him. Yet he couldn't retaliate on the spot because he feared the military power in my hands. This idea must have been his what a fool. I took out the military tally and before handing it over, I bowed respectfully. Your daughter has always served Father Emperor. It is just that while I was away from the capital, Zhang Jingyue actually stole my fiancé. I was asking him for a promise. He answered without hesitation. This matter, Jingyue did indeed go too far. It is understandable that you harbor resentment and need to vent your emotions. Zhang Yanjin frowned beside him. Father Emperor, enough, this matter is settled. Father Emperor made the final decision, Shu Yi. Return to your residence. On my way out, I ran into Zhang Jingyue. She was wrapped in a cloak, leaning against the railing, flashing me an innocent yet sweet smile. Actually, I know, elder sister risked her life killing enemies and earning merits at the border just to help Crown Prince brother establish himself better in the capital. But what is the use? Now I am the sister-brother values. The woman Wuja loves. All the rare treasures sent into the palace have to be shown to me first for selection. The things you traded your life for only made my life better, that is all. Imperial sister, do you hate me a lot? I looked at her expressionlessly for a moment. Then I stepped forward, grabbed her by the collar, and slapped her twice across the face. Zhang Jingyue's fair little face swelled up red, and she fell sitting on the ground, crying out in disbelief. Zhang Shui. I picked her up from the ground again and kicked her in the lower abdomen. You know I've killed people, and you still dare to provoke me. She curled up in the snow in pain, glaring at me with venomous eyes. I looked down at her from above, my tone mocking. If you feel wronged, go crawling to your brother, to your dear lover, and tattle on me. Let's see if they can actually seek justice for you. Of course they can't. I just handed over military power. And even just for the sake of keeping up appearances, His Majesty wouldn't punish me over this little scuffle. Not only that, he even issued a decree conferring upon me the title of Princess Minghua and bestowed upon me many rare treasures. I accepted the decree and expressed my gratitude. Then I turned around and had Fang Jingyu transport everything to the Jiangnan region and the northern border areas to sell it all off. Consider it preparing military funds in advance. Late at night, she and I sat facing each other in the pavilion of the princess's residence. Jiang Yanjun really is a fool. Did he never think that if I hadn't allowed it, could those rumors of his have spread so fast? That is right, the so called rumors about claiming undeserved military merit were something Fang Jingyu and I had planned in advance, and had people spread, the more incompetent and powerless princess Zhang Shuyi appeared on the surface. The harder it would be for others to notice the secret recruitment of soldiers and strategic positioning. I had long noticed that Father Emperor was muddle-headed. This return to the capital was originally to help my brother usurp the throne. Avenging our grudges would also bring comfort to Mother's spirit in heaven, but he sided with the enemy as his mother and became a useless fool too. No matter, then I'll take over. Relying on the promise earned by handing over the military tally, I began visiting the palace daily, openly bullying Zhang Jingyue. I cut up her expensive, elaborately crafted dresses, smashed her jewelry, and pressed her head down to bow to me. I wouldn't stop until she kowtowed until her head bled. She still tried to play the innocent flower, crying and trembling all over. Yue doesn't know where she offended Imperial sister. I grabbed her hair, slammed it against the edge of the nearby table, and said with a smile, "Save your tears for those two fools, Li Wuja and Zhang Yanjun. I know Imperial sister resents me for receiving Crown Prince brother and the young lord's favor. I kicked her over. Etsuke. They dote on you so much. Why don't they come avenge you?" She was no longer like before. Not only had she become Zhang Yanjun's most beloved sister, but she had also climbed up to consort Zhou's high branch with him. Unfortunately, these two still had to rely on Father Emperor's good graces, and he was busy taking over the troops I had commanded for 3 years. Not daring to deal with me openly. What is more, in Father Emperor's eyes, I am just throwing a tantrum out of incompetence, only daring to bully Zhang Jingyue, not daring to resist his stripping of my power. He couldn't ask for more. Soon it would be Fang Jingyu's birthday. When I went to the largest jewelry shop in the capital to pick out a birthday gift for her, I actually ran into Li Wuja. His gaze fell on the pear-blossom jade hairpin in my hand and suddenly became complicated Shuyi. I paused for a moment, then suddenly remembered. When I was 13. The token of love he gave me was a pear blossom hairpin he carved by hand. At that time, Consort Zhou was in favor and had absolute power in the inner palace. Life was extremely hard for me and Zhang Yanjun. Li Wuja, as the heir of the loyal and brave marquis, Everyone in the palace said that the Marquis was going to break off our engagement and marry another noble lady instead, so he made that hairpin and came to see me. I looked at the fine knife marks covering both his hands and didn't take the hairpin. I just sighed, our engagement is about to be called off. Young lord, you'd better take this back and stay away from me. Who says it will be called off? He raised his voice slightly and forcefully pressed the hairpin into my hand. The only person I want to marry in this life is Zhang Shuyi alone. This vow will never change. Actually, Shuyi, our engagement was never broken off. Li Wuxia looked at me, his eyes showing nostalgia and struggle. Now that you've returned to the capital, we can still get married. It is just I hope you won't bully Ah Yue anymore. She is just a young girl whose birth mother passed away early and doesn't understand anything. Those things from before, perhaps you misunderstood. I suddenly lifted my head and stared at him intensely. Rage mixed with sharp, piercing pain surged into my heart all at once. Back then, I had clearly told him that my mother, the Empress, being poisoned was something Zhang Jingyue did on her own initiative, to curry favor with Consort Zhou. At that time, he still shared my hatred. No matter how you want to take revenge in the future, I will protect you. In just 3 short years, things had changed to this extent. Taptui disgusting. I grabbed that jade hairpin and strode up to him. Under his astonished gaze, I reached out and gripped his neck, pushing him hard against the wall behind him. The back of his head hit the wall with a dull thud. You don't actually think you are being deeply devoted and noble, do you? Willing to endure humiliation and marry me just so Zhang Jingyue won't be bullied anymore. Why don't you consider whether I am willing to marry an incompetent man like you who only relies on his ancestors' protection? If my mother, the Empress, hadn't pleaded for mercy back then, your father would have been demoted to a commoner long ago, let alone your current position as heir. If my mother, the Empress, hadn't intentionally looked after her, Zhang Jingyue would have died at Consort Zhou's hands hundreds of times over. She repaid kindness with malice. And you turned your back on her completely. You and Zhang Jingyue are truly a perfect match. Before Li Wuxia could react, I raised the hairpin and fiercely stabbed its sharp tip into his shoulder. Amidst the splattering blood, I stared at his face contorted in pain and said word by word, "Don't come bother me again. Next time, I'll stab your heart." When spring came and the ice melted and snow thawed, there was suddenly trouble in the Jiangnan region. The small island nation of Wa in the Eastern Sea had somehow gotten hold of our border defense maps. Taking advantage of the dead of night, they suddenly launched a sneak attack on Haizhou Prefecture. They burned, killed, and looted, committing every evil imaginable. And because their methods were so vicious and cruel, no one could stand against them for a time. And my incompetent fool of a father, the Emperor. His first reaction wasn't to send reinforcements, but to smooth things over, he sent people to negotiate with the Wei people, and eventually brought their envoys into the capital, hosting a grand banquet in their honor. Naturally, I was also invited to this banquet, and I asked Fang Jingyu, "You were born in the northern border and grew up at the frontier. Didn't you say before that you've always wanted to see the splendor of the capital? Come on! Today I'll take you into the palace." She sat with me in the carriage and shook her head, saying, "The ruler of a nation and the crown prince." Yet between the two of them, there is not a shred of backbone. Facing a tiny nation, their first reaction is to back down and negotiate. I tugged at the corner of my lips. Yet there was no trace of a smile in my eyes. Yes, utterly absurd. In the great hall, I saw the envoys from the Wo Kingdom. Those few people were short and stout, with weasel-like faces and rat-like eyes, their gazes full of hostility and even viciousness. They gave Father Emperor a barely passable bow. Then their eyes began to brazenly survey their surroundings. When sweeping past my face, they paused briefly for a moment. They actually exchanged a glance with Zhang Yanjun on the high seat. After several rounds of wine, Father Emperor asked them amiably, What conditions would it take for you to withdraw your troops on this visit to the capital? That lead envoy suddenly knelt down. Your Imperial Majesty. In truth, our Ten has always wished to form a marriage alliance with your esteemed dynasty. Thus, he specifically sent us to seek the princess's hand in marriage. As long as Princess Minghua comes to our dynasty for the marriage alliance, His Majesty the Ten will treat her with the honored rights of an imperial consort. We beseech your majesty to grant this. I suddenly raised my head, staring fixedly at Zhang Yanjin on the high seat, and beside him Zhang Jingyue, whose lips couldn't help but curl into a smug smile. I only had time to utter a single word before someone among the officials beside me abruptly knelt down. It was Li Wujie's father, the old Marquis of Zhongyang. We implore Princess Minghua to consider the greater good, to think of our dynasty's century-old foundation and the safety of the common people. Around him, a circle of court officials knelt down before me, just like that, please, princess, for the greater good. Connecting the dots, I understood everything in an instant. There was never any accidentally leaked border defense map. From the very beginning, this was a trap set by my dear brother to humiliate me and get rid of me. Marquis Zhongyang raised his bark-like weathered face, tears streaming down as he looked at me, concealing his blatantly obvious intentions beneath so-called righteousness for the nation. This old minister knows that the princess, precious as gold and jade, surely does not wish to cross the ocean. But now, for the sake of the people, Zhang Yanjun, I ignored everyone else present, only fixing my sharp gaze on Zhang Yanjun, not far away. For your own selfish desires, you disregard the safety of the common people. And now you still have the nerve to sit calmly on high, a beast like you. How are you fit to be the crown prince? His expression darkened, absurd. Zhang Shuyi, do you have no regard for hierarchy and rules? Rules. I slowly chewed on those two words, my gaze sweeping inch by inch over everyone in the hall with their varying expressions, as if watching an utterly absurd farce. Then I suddenly laughed out loud. All right then, brother, why don't you take a look at my rules? I triggered the mechanism. And the dagger that had been strapped tightly against my forearm slid out from my sleeve, gripped firmly in my hand. The familiar rough hilt pressed against my palm, I gripped it, leaped forward, and rushed to those smug envoys from the Wa country. I raised my hand and swung hard with a squelch. The blade cut through flesh and severed the throat. Blood splattered everywhere. Scalding human blood splashed onto my cheeks, and I wiped it away without a care. A thick, sweet metallic smell filled my nostrils as I watched the three bodies collapse before me. I slowly turned around. Father Emperor stood up in near fury and alarm. Minghua, have you gone mad? Your daughter has not gone mad. Blood gathered into a small stream on the dagger. Then dripped down from the blade's tip drop by drop. I stood before the three corpses, seeing in everyone's eyes my current appearance, like a vengeful ghost. Those who offend me shall be punished, no matter how difficult, shall be punished, no matter how far. Father Emperor, this is your daughter's principle. The Wa country was originally a tiny nation dependent on our dynasty, yet 10 years ago they began eyeing our territory with greed. This time they burned, killed, and plundered, slaughtering innocent civilians, utterly despicable. Your daughter advocates war, absolutely not peace. I beseech Father Emperor to issue a decree allowing your daughter to lead troops south, drive out the WA pirates, and reclaim Haizhou Prefecture. The last sentence I spoke with resounding conviction. Princess. The old Marquis of Zhongyang must hate me to death for injuring his son, yet still wouldn't give up trying to speak. I gripped the dagger tightly and raised my hand impatiently, slicing off a large chunk of his hair. Old widower, shut up. Father Emperor gripped the armrests of the dragon throne, looking at me with shock and hesitation. He really couldn't be called a wise ruler. Back then, he relied on my mother, the Empress, and my grandfather and uncles to fight for the throne, yet he was wary of them. Later, once he secured the throne, He neglected my mother and deliberately favored civil officials over military ones. That is how he ended up in this situation, step by step. You know, back when grandfather and my uncles were around, the Japanese were only fit to bow and scrape before us, submitting as vassals. At this moment, the few military generals still serving at court who had once served under my uncle all knelt down as well, because Father Emperor favored civil over military officials. They had already declined in power, but still they could at least say a few words. We implore your majesty to grant the princess permission to lead the campaign south and reclaim Haijo Prefecture. The military power he had just taken back would have to be handed over to me again. Father Emperor was clearly very unwilling. However, I had already beheaded the Japanese envoy in front of everyone. There was no way they would negotiate peace with us again. Left with no choice, he could only agree to let me deploy troops. Yet, to keep me in check, he issued an edict on the spot appointing Li Wuzhe, the heir of Marquis Zhongyang, as the army supervisory inspector, whatever. I don't care, those who abandoned me. Yesterday's days cannot be kept. If he really dares to obstruct my plans, Haijo Prefecture will be the burial ground I've chosen for him. I received the imperial edict and walked out of the Great Hall with Fang Jingyu, without sparing another glance at Jing Jingyue, whose expression had turned ashen beside me. Simone, whose vision is forever fixated on romantic affairs and backyard intrigues, was never an opponent worthy of my attention. She is merely an enemy I am destined to kill. Outside, the setting sun sank westward, its fiery twilight glow spilling over the golden glazed roof tiles of the palace. She suddenly sighed. I suddenly feel that what you said back then was right. I turned my head. What? This capital may be far more prosperous than the northern frontier, but it is already rotten to the core. Her gaze swept past those dazzling glazed tiles, then fell back onto me. The way you drew your blade and killed in the hall just now. So swift and decisive, and so beautiful when blood splattered within 5 steps. I raised an eyebrow slightly. How does it compare to when I killed your husband? She clapped her hands and laughed heartily. Naturally, your blade skills have improved considerably. I met Fang Jingyu in the 2nd year of my exile, relying on the old subordinates my late grandfather had left behind. I entered the military camp. With the swordsmanship I'd practiced with my uncle since childhood, I boldly stepped onto the battlefield. In the military camp, there is no distinction between princess and commoner, let alone that I was already a convicted criminal. I applied the military tactics and strategies my grandfather and mother had taught me as a child, leading a small elite force to strike from the flank. A resounding victory, though I was wounded. From then on, I secured my foothold in the army, when I was taken out by a few brothers to clear my mind. I happened to run into that scholar who had come to help the soldiers in the camp write letters home a few days ago. He was holding a wooden stick, beating the woman curled up on the ground, shouting that he would sell her to a brothel. I am about to go to the capital for the imperial examination, but I don't have enough travel money as my wife. Shouldn't you share your husband's burdens? Seeing that the woman refused no matter what, a hint of viciousness flashed in his eyes. He actually raised his hand to tear at her clothes. With so many people coming and going on this street, if your body is seen, how can you remain my proper wife? I drew my sword and killed him. Then I took off the cloak from my body and wrapped the barely clothed woman on the ground tightly. Her hollow eyes gradually regained their light, yet she didn't shed a single tear, General. She tugged at the hem of my clothes, bracing herself against the ground with one hand slowly standing up. Can I follow you? Before I could speak, she took a couple of breaths and laid out her bargaining chips. My name is Fang Jingyu. My father was a private school teacher, and I've been reading and writing since I was 5. My husband was able to pass the scholar's examination thanks to the essays I wrote for him. I've also read military strategy and can understand battle formations. I am definitely not useless. She was extremely clever and knew how to assess the situation. At our first meeting, she clearly and decisively laid out all her cards, making me realize that she had value. My clever strategist, the most reliable partner in treason candlelight, flickered in the night, a single flame like a bean. Your Highness, you are heading to Jiangnan this time, a long journey across mountains and rivers. She raised the wine cup in her hand to toast me. I'll stay at the princess's residence, watching over this cesspool of the capital, waiting for your return. When we set off for Haizhou Prefecture, Li Wujia's injuries hadn't fully healed yet. I rode a horse, so he could only travel by carriage whenever we stopped to rest. I could feel his immensely complicated gaze falling on me. Finally, on the day we arrived outside Haizhou Prefecture, he stopped me outside the tent Shu Yi. Can't we talk? What do you want to talk about? I looked at him with great interest. If you are going to spout some bullshit about our old engagement, save it. It disgusts me to hear it. You used to be well-read in poetry and classics, yet now you speak so crudely. As a princess, you shouldn't. I completely lost my patience and slapped him across the face. Li Wujia, my noble young Marquis of Zhongyang, I spent 3 years at the border military camp. Did you think I went there to enjoy myself? The wind and snow of the northern frontier are harsh. Naturally, it can't nurture the pretentious crap you have in the capital. You've already admitted that you fell for Zhang Jingyue long ago. Now, what are you doing in front of me? Pretending to be deeply devoted, his gaze met mine. After a moment of silence, he suddenly said, Zhang Shuyi, for things between us to reach this point today, is it really my fault alone? If you hadn't ignored my advice back then and insisted on taking the blame for His Highness, the Crown Prince's murder, you wouldn't have been exiled to the border. You were gone for 3 years without any news. If Yue hadn't tried her hardest to cheer me up, I might not have lasted until the day you returned. You only have him, your brother, in your heart. When have you ever put me first? I was shocked by his shameless words. When I came to my senses, I only felt anger rising in my heart. If I hadn't taken the blame, Jiang Yanjun would have died at the border long ago. How could he have his position as crown prince today? How could you be so pleased with yourself today? You think you have such a deep bond as siblings. You don't really believe he killed the national preceptor by accident because the man insulted the late empress, do you? I froze. A chill suddenly shot up from the base of my spine. What do you mean? Li Wujia stared straight into my eyes, curled his lips, and slowly let out a cold laugh. Back then, His Highness the Crown Prince wasn't valued by His Majesty and was repeatedly suppressed by Consort Zhou's faction. In his resentment, he started frequenting the pleasure quarters, but he ended up fancying the same courtesan as the national preceptor, whom His Majesty had just begun to favor, and a dispute arose. He had been drinking and lost control when he struck, which is how he killed the man. Memories suddenly came flooding back. I recalled that snowy winter day 3 years ago. Zhang Yanjun suddenly came to me in a panic, the hem of his dark robe still stained with blood that hadn't dried yet. He said the imperial advisor was Consort Zhou's man, and while frequenting the brothel, he had the audacity to compare mother to a woman of pleasure. I got into an argument with him and lost control of my strength. I asked him, why would royal brother go to such a place of ill repute? He replied without hesitation. I was trying to follow him to find evidence of his collusion with Consort Zhou, plotting to deceive the emperor. He is my brother, my blood brother from the same mother. Of course, I believed him. Although brother is the legitimate son, his wings aren't fully grown yet. If he were to bear the crime of murder on top of that, he'd truly be abandoned by father emperor. Besides, having studied military strategy and scholarly arts with grandfather since childhood, brother excels at literature while I excel at martial arts. No matter what, nothing could happen to him. Go back now and change your clothes. Burn the blood-stained robe and don't leave any evidence behind. I said, brother, remember, I am the one who killed him. I suddenly snapped back to reality, looking at Li Wujia before me. There was a subtle look of satisfaction on his face. Who do you think you are? Since you knew back then, yet didn't tell me, how are you any different from him? I said, word by word, Li Wujia, You are just like that Zhang Yanjin Both shameless, despicable scum. I didn't sleep all night. A silver white crescent moon hung in the night sky, and the night breeze from Haijo carried the scent of seawater. I sat in the moonlight holding my sword, thinking over and over about the past. So the root of all these changes wasn't from the 3 years I was away from the capital. My brother and the childhood sweetheart I once loved, they had rotted long ago. But so what? 3 years, 1,000 days. The bitter cold of the border honing me day after day. My heart is as firm as bedrock, unmoved by all things. Reclaiming Haijo Prefecture went much smoother than I had imagined. The Japanese excelled at naval warfare, so I lured them to forcibly shift the battlefield to land, scattered their formation, and crushed them, one by one. As I reclaimed Haijo Prefecture step by step, the way Li Wuxia looked at me grew stranger and stranger. It seemed to carry a hint of conflict and reluctance, even a slight trace of hatred. In the final battle, the Japanese were retreating steadily. I chased after their commander on horseback, riding deep into a desolate valley. A few steps later, Li Wuxia followed me 2 against 1, and the enemy was already at the end of his rope. It should have been a sure victory. Yet, the instant I raised my blade to stab the Japanese commander, Li Wuxia suddenly turned his blade and slashed heavily at the front legs of my horse. The steed let out a wretched whinny and collapsed to its knees. My body lurched forward, a sharp sword tip thrusting toward my face, about to pierce my heart. Li Wuxia's icy voice reached my ears as if he had finally made some kind of resolve, Zhang Shuyi. It is not that I've wronged you. No one in the capital palace, high or low, wants you to return alive. The sword tip pierced my chest, yet it could only penetrate half an inch before coming to a complete stop. Li Wuxia, who was holding the sword, suddenly froze. It was at this moment that a cold, gleaming arrow suddenly flew in from the side with such force that it actually shot the sword in half. Seizing the chance to catch my breath, I leaped off my horse, raised my sword high, and swung it with all my might. The Japanese commander's head was severed from his body, and on the head flying high in the air, an expression of terror and disbelief still lingered. Then I whirled around abruptly, took the longbow from my back, aimed, and swiftly nocked and released an arrow. The arrow pierced through the fleeing Li Wuxia's back, and he tumbled off his horse, rolling into the low bushes. I took 2 gasping breaths, gripping my blood-stained sword, and walked toward him step by step. He was still not dead, lying face up in the bushes, his face covered in wounds, staring at me with a shocked expression. He opened his mouth, but only blood and scattered words came out. Jiang Shu-yi. What a fool. I propped myself up with the sword tip against the ground, bent forward on one knee, and patted his face contemptuously. I figured out what you were planning long ago. Did you think I wouldn't be on guard? I clearly confirmed there were no military ambushes here. I couldn't help but laugh during those months when you forced me to hand over the military seal. Did you think I would just behave myself and be a powerless princess? That I could only vent by beating and scolding Zhang Jingyu? In reality, Zhongnian was prosperous. Fang Jingyu and I had contacted my late grandfather's old subordinates who had retired from the military and had long prepared elite soldiers, fine horses, and abundant provisions, hidden in Lizhou right next to Haijo Prefecture. A few days ago, I had already secretly contacted them, having them come in small batches, each lying low in various parts of Haijo Prefecture. Naturally, that included this place. Worthless fool, if you and Zhang Yanjin wanted to deal with me, I would at least respect your guts if you came at me directly with a sword. But you didn't dare. You only dared to humiliate me through the hands of the Japanese. And for that, you didn't even hesitate to sacrifice the lives and livelihoods of countless people in Haijo Prefecture. I will use your blood to comfort their spirits. Let's start with you. I drew my dagger, and while he still had feeling, I gripped his neck and slowly sliced open his throat. Scalding human blood bubbled and gurgled. Pouring onto my hands, I admired the expression of extreme agony on his face with satisfaction. Suddenly, I remembered something. Oh, right. Are you curious why your sword couldn't pierce my heart? I tore open my collar and pulled out a heart-protecting mirror covered with cracks. Sorry, I have a heart-protecting mirror my strategist made for me. You don't. Time rewinds to the night before departure. Fang Jingyu and I talked by candlelight through the night, laying out our plans for everything in the capital one by one. When we finished, she suddenly stood up, opened the rosewood cabinet beside her, and took out a small heart-protecting mirror. I made it with 2 layers and embroidered snow lotus flowers around the edges. Consider it a prayer for your safety. I glanced at it and smiled. Your embroidery has improved again. She rolled her eyes at me, bent down, pulled open my lapel, and placed the heart-protecting mirror properly in position. This only guards against petty villains, not honorable men. Haizhou Prefecture was recaptured. The surveillance commissioner and heir to the Marquis of Zhangyang, Li Wuzhe, was executed on the spot for colluding with the Japanese and plotting to murder Princess Minghua. And I led over 10,000 elite soldiers back to the capital. Along the way, the common people lined the roads to welcome us. On the day we arrived at the capital, the candles in the main courtyard of the princess's residence burned through the entire night. Fang Jingyu and I sat upright on the soft couch. A flicker of candlelight danced in the depths of her eyes. She said, "Everything is ready." Also, during our preparations, I discovered something very interesting. Perhaps it can help us deal with that brother of yours even more bloodlessly. The next evening, Imperial Father held a banquet in the palace to entertain me. He raised his wine cup high and clinked it with mine from afar. I knew he wanted to use courtesy before force after praising me. He would use both soft and hard tactics to pressure me into handing over military power. Too bad this time. Things won't go as you wish. Imperial Father, I toyed with the wine cup in my hand and smiled. Father Emperor should drink less. Otherwise, if your body gets drained and you can't satisfy Consort Zhou, wouldn't that just trouble Big Brother to till the fields for father again? As soon as these words came out, the entire hall was shocked. Jiang Shuyi. What nonsense are you spouting? Zhang Yanjun reacted intensely, practically jumping to his feet in a mix of shock and rage, his movements so dramatic that he even knocked over the low table in front of him. My gaze shifted to him, and I let out a scornful laugh. Crown Prince, before you react so dramatically, shouldn't you first hide those hickeys that your May-December romance left on your neck? He subconsciously raised his hand to cover it, and the instant his hand touched his neck, he realized almost immediately. But the implication of that gesture was already self-evident, Your Majesty. Someone cried out in alarm. I looked up and saw Father Emperor sitting on the high platform, raising his finger to point in Zhang Yanjun's direction. But his eyes rolled back, and the raised finger trembled violently. You unfilial son. After forcing out these few words, his head tilted to the side and he fainted. Samon, come. The sudden turn of events caught everyone off guard. But I suddenly let my expression darken, raising my hand to rest on the sword hilt. Zhang Yanjun shows no respect for his superiors. Defies ethical principles, had the audacity to have an affair with an imperial consort, and even attempted to harm Father Emperor. Seize him. And noble consort Zhou, who is currently feigning illness and hiding in Jiaofang Palace. Seize her as well and throw her into the imperial prison. The imperial guards, who had long been replaced with our own people by me and Fang Jingyu, swarmed forward. The other court officials wanted to speak up, but wisely shut their mouths when hundreds of elite soldiers suddenly flooded into the hall with their weapons drawn. I walked at an unhurried pace, step by step, until I stood before Zhang Yanjun, who was being forced to kneel on the ground with his arms held down. I casually smashed a cup and pressed the sharp porcelain shard against his neck. His face turned deathly pale with fear, yet he couldn't utter a single word. Brother, I said, you plotted to murder Father Emperor, acknowledged a traitor as your mother, and even had an affair with her. With such deeds, if I kill you right now, I am afraid in your next life you'll only be reborn in the animal realm, won't you? This was the interesting matter that Fang Jingyu had inadvertently discovered. Noble consort Zhou was a person of strong desires. In her youth, she seduced Father Emperor and gradually drained his body, and when he became inadequate, she coaxed him into taking medicine for several years. Now that even the medicine no longer worked, she turned her gaze to the young and vigorous Zhang Yanjun. She indulged in carnal pleasures with Zhang Yanjun, And seeing that Father Emperor was old yet still clung tightly to power, she began administering slow-acting poison to him, wanting Zhang Yanjun to take his place as soon as possible. Now, it has instead become my gain. That night, the Zhang Kingdom's imperial palace remained brightly lit throughout the entire night, with blood nearly flowing like rivers, after I completely eradicated the last remaining faction of Jiang Yanjun's loyalists who refused to surrender. A new sun had just risen on the horizon. I walked toward Jiang Jingyue's residence. The moment I stepped through the door, I ran right into Feng Jingyu. It was too chaotic in the Great Hall earlier, and she slipped away in the confusion. She happened to be spotted by one of our patrol squads at the south gate and was brought to me. She gently patted my shoulder. I thought, from what you told me before, you'd probably prefer to sort everything out with her here. She turned and left. Only Zhang Jingyue and I remained in the room, along with the Imperial guards standing watch at the door. I sized her up for a moment, then kicked her hard in the waist and stomped down heavily on her lower abdomen, grinding my foot repeatedly. Zhang Jingyue, you were born to a palace maid and bullied all your life in the palace. It was my mother, the Empress, who looked after you, saving you from Consort Zhou's clutches, time and again, even bringing you to live with me in the palace, sharing my food and quarters. Yet you repaid kindness with treachery, willingly currying favor with Consort Zhou and poisoning my mother. But she was just a powerless empress with Consort Zhou's influence growing by the day. Could she really protect me forever? In her usual timid, innocent-sounding voice, every man for himself, or heaven and earth will destroy him. If I didn't ingratiate myself with Consort Zhou, a lowly-born princess like me would only be sent off for a political marriage after coming of age. Hearing this, fury churned in my heart, and I stomped on her body several more times. She coughed in agony. I don't understand. Why? What? Isn't Li Wuja your beloved? He transferred his affections to me. You should be heartbroken. How dare you? How dare you just kill him? Crown Prince, he was your blood brother from the same mother? This kind of brother, whoever wants him can have him. This princess doesn't care for him, I said coldly, crouching down and lifting her chin with the tip of my dagger. Don't you like him? I'll give him to you then. As I spoke, I raised my hand, and the dagger's tip slashed heavily across her delicate face, two intersecting gashes deep enough to see bone. She tremblingly touched her own face, then suddenly began screaming like she'd gone mad. Is this all it takes to frighten you? Zhang Jingyue, I tugged at the corner of my lips. Right now, this is only the beginning. I ordered people to throw Zhang Jingyue and Consort Zhou into the dungeon, force-feeding them medicine daily, while nursing their bodies back to health. The medicine also multiplied their sensitivity to pain several times over. Then I had guards stationed there, slicing them once and cutting off a piece of flesh every half hour. As for that incompetent fool of a Father Emperor, even with the imperial physicians trying their best, his body had already been hollowed out, and he'd been poisoned. Under the severe shock, half his body became paralyzed. No matter, I had someone hold his hand and guide him to write the edict character by character, deposing the crown prince and passing the throne to Princess Minghua. Then I thoughtfully ordered people to watch over him. You must treat Father Emperor well and let him live out his remaining years in comfort. Oh, right, my mother the Empress and my grandfather and uncles all passed away early. Father Emperor must have always felt guilty about this, right? So attend to him properly, and every day help him out of bed to kowtow 100 times each to the memorial tablets of my mother and grandfather. Consider this a small act of filial piety from me, his daughter, on Father Emperor's behalf. The palace servants attending nearby murmured their assent, and my Father Emperor, lying on the bed with his face twisted and eyes crooked, glared at me with eyes nearly bursting from rage, yet couldn't even utter a complete sentence. I stood by the bedside, looking at him with a smile. Father Emperor, you always said I had no manners, and that Mother Empress failed to raise me properly. Back then, I don't know how many times you punished me for this. Now, Father Emperor should see what my rules are. For the next year, I was incredibly busy. I consolidated my grandfather's former subordinates, whom I had secretly contacted, mobilized troops, and pointed my sword at the northern frontier. Having already captured 6 cities from the Chang people in succession, just as we were about to breach their imperial city, they finally sent a letter of surrender. They were willing to become my vassal state and pay tribute every year. It is said they will also send their most beautiful 9th prince of the Chang tribe to your majesty for a marriage alliance. I propped up my chin and said lazily, "Is that so?" That is a small matter. The way a country refuses to learn its lesson, repeatedly invading the South Sea region of our dynasty. Haizhou Prefecture and Lizhou have suffered many casualties because of this. I've been training naval forces for most of the year now. It is time to test our strength against them. I deliberated for a moment, issued several decrees, and announced the end of court. After the court officials bowed and withdrew, only Fang Jingyu remained in the Great Hall. I had already granted her the titles of Marquis and Prime Minister. "Your Majesty, this minister has an important matter to report." Seeing her serious expression, I teased, "Is there something that can't wait until we have dinner together tonight?" "Zhang Yanjun wants to see you." My movement suddenly froze. If she hadn't reminded me, I would have almost forgotten about this good brother of mine. After that palace coup, I dealt with all the other enemies. Only Zhang Yanjun remained. For several days, I kept dreaming about mother, dreaming about my childhood. I was good at martial arts, but was always scolded by father for being a princess whose words and actions were rough and improper. A few times, I couldn't help but shed tears from the grievance. It was he who snuck out of the palace to buy folk sugar figurines to comfort me. He had once truly been a good brother connected to me by blood. I had also once sincerely wanted to help him ascend to the throne, and then avenge mother. My feelings toward him were far more complicated than toward Li Wuxia. So I only had him locked in the dungeon together with dozens of snakes and didn't execute him immediately. Now, as I walked into the dungeon, I saw he had already been tortured beyond recognition. So thin, he barely looked human anymore. That makes sense. Ever since he was little, he has been terrified of snakes. Seeing me, his lifeless eyes stirred slightly. When he spoke, his voice was so hoarse, it was unrecognizable. Like tearing silk? "Why, don't you just kill me?" I opened the cell door, stood before him, and looked down at him. "Why did you do this?" The torture of being kept from daylight for so long made him stare at me sluggishly, taking a long while to react. "Why? Because I am a prince. And you are just a princess. She only made you suffer a little in the harem, but what about me? Not enough to eat, not enough to wear, ignored by father in the court. When I finally got an assignment, her faction blocked me at every turn. I couldn't get anything done, and father would scold me again. How could you possibly know what kind of life I've been living? As the legitimate son, yet I couldn't even compare to those eunuchs. Any noble's son could bully me as they pleased. That is because you are weak and useless. If I were you, I'd rather draw my sword and take them down with me than be a coward and take the abuse," I said harshly. "Even so, how has mother ever wronged you? How have I ever wronged you? She has wronged me. Why could consort Zhou enjoy such favor, while she couldn't lower herself to please father for my sake?" He tilted his head up, looking at me with a ferocious expression. "If you want to blame someone, blame her for being a fallen from Grace Empress. A useless mother." Rage surged up like flames. I suddenly grabbed his lapel and shoved him hard against the stone wall behind him. Once, then again, until he slid down from my hands like a pile of mangled flesh. I straightened up again, looking down at him. His hair and blood were matted together, his features barely recognizable. I moved my lips. "Goodbye, brother. That night, I dreamed of Mother Empress once again, having killed Zhang Yanjun with my own hands." I could barely meet her eyes, but she walked over and stroked my hair. "Shu Yi," I said softly, "Mother Empress, it is my fault. You did nothing wrong. It was Yanjun, as your older brother, who failed to protect you. In the dream, she took my rough hands covered with layers of old scars. her voice full of heartache. Our Shuyi must have suffered so much. My heart felt like it was suddenly submerged in warm water, all the lingering negative emotions vanishing without a trace at her words. I opened my eyes. The moonlight outside the window was bright. All the past, like flowing sand swept by the night wind before my eyes, scattered silently into the wind. This year I was 20. I had settled scores with all my enemies and obtained everything I wanted. From then on, all that is left in life is leaving a name for the ages.